All right, we were discussing the concept of substance and some of the principal or major attempts in the history of philosophy to analyze that concept, in other words, to provide informative or philosophically interesting necessary and sufficient conditions for the concept. Conditions C such that necessarily X is a substance if and only if X satisfies condition C. So what is that condition that explains what a substance is? Just as we were trying to understand earlier what the necessary and sufficient conditions are for something being a cause of something else. Same kind of thing. So here we're trying to answer a what question, a Socratic question, like what is a cause, what is a substance? What is knowledge? Famous example from epistemology. Similarly is a Socratic question calling for the discovery of a set of logically necessary and sufficient conditions for the application of the concept that we're trying to analyze. All right, so the first account we looked at was put forward by Aristotle. It was the theory that something is a substance if and only if it can undergo intrinsic qualitative change. And we saw that there were some problems with that. It's defensible, but only if you defend a particular ontology. That is, it doesn't have very much ontological neutrality. So if you assume there are no boundaries, for example, then you can defend the theory. If you assume that atomism is false, then you can defend that account. But if you want to leave those questions open, if you want to say that, well, there could be boundaries and there could be atoms, then you have some counterexamples, because atoms are substances, but what I mean by an atom is an indivisible substance. An example being, say, an electron. Electrons are substances, they're tiny little substances, but arguably they're not capable of undergoing intrinsic qualitative change. They don't seem to have accidental intrinsic qualities. And on the other side, boundaries are capable of undergoing intrinsic qualitative change, like the surface of a ball will change its geometry when you squish the ball. The same surface, it seems, continues to exist. It goes from being perfectly smooth to being squished. But a boundary is not a substance. It's a limit of a substance. It's a extremely insubstantial substance. Right, so if we're willing to abandon ontological neutrality, we can just cut away those counterexamples. But if we want to be neutral and we want our account of what a substance is to work, to distinguish those kinds of insubstantial entities such as boundaries from substances, then we're going to need a different account. So the boundary counterexample is a counterexample to the sufficiency of the definition. The one involving the electrons is a counterexample to the definition providing a necessary condition of a substance, because some substances, i.e. Electrons, don't meet that condition, nonetheless are substances. All right, so let's move on to Aristotle's second definition. He says in the categories that a substance, that which is called a substance most strictly, primarily, and most of all, is that which is neither said of a subject nor in a subject. For example, the individual man or the individual horse. Right? So it's that which is neither said of a subject nor in a subject. This is a curious definition. It sort of mixes together a number of different kinds of criteria. So on the one hand, you have this very ontological criterion that it's not in a subject. And then you have this kind of quasi-linguistic, metaphysical notion of being said of a subject, and that substance is not said of a subject. So the complete definition says it's something that's neither said of a subject nor in a subject, and then we have to spell out what these two terms mean for Aristotle. This definition occurs within the context of his famous theory of the 10 categories of being. So according to that theory, in addition to the primary substance, which is sort of the anchoring of the whole theory, in addition to the primary substance, there are 10 categories of being. And somehow individual substance occurs in a way that's ancillary to this, because everyone always understands Aristotle as saying there are 10 categories of being, one of which is substance. Right? So, but he recognizes two types of substances, one of which is very different than the other ontologically. So you have the individual man or the individual horse, right? The union of form and matter. It's very rich. And very autonomous kind of entity. So there's a substance in that sense. That's the primary substance. But that's not one of the 10 categories of being. The category of being that corresponds to substance he calls secondary substance. So that's one of the, that's the first category of being of the 10, is secondary substance. So a secondary substance is basically an essence of a primary substance. So if Morris the cat, as we may assume, is a primary substance for Aristotle in the categories, as well as for our ordinary folk ontology, right? Morris and other cats are all primary substances. They are autonomous entities or creatures that exist. The secondary substance for Aristotle would be the essence of Morris, which would be catness or felininity. So felininity would be an example of the first category, secondary substance or essence. The second category is quantity. And Aristotle believes that all of these categories in some way piggyback on primary substance. So an essence is a special quality of the primary substance, right? The catness can't exist without a cat, so it depends on cats for Aristotle. Right? No catness without cats. Quantity is, of course, dependent on substance, right, for Aristotle. To have three, you need to have three primary substances, three objects, like three horses or three cats. So you could view quantity as a kind of property of substances, or of a trio of groups of substances, like duos, trios, quartets, quintets, sextets, septets, and, octets, and so on. All right. The next one is called quality or qualification. So, for example, suppose Morris is furry or brown, or tortoiseshell colored, or calico colored, well, calicos have to be females, so Morris wouldn't be calico. But I think it's possible to have a male calico, but it's like 1 in a billion, or basically negligible. Calicos are almost by law of nature, I think, female. Okay, so that would be a quality. So qualities are accidents, generally. Accidents of substances. So there's Aristotle then distinguishes, say, the furriness of Morris from the catness of Morris. The catness of Morris is a secondary substance or essence. I guess he calls it a secondary substance because it's so intimately connected to a primary substance. It's the very essence of the primary substance, so it inherits a little bit of the, some of the inherits the mantle of substantiality because it's the essence of what is primarily substantial. So it's speak derivatively or secondarily substantial, whereas an accident isn't necessary for the existence of the substance. So it's just a mere quality. But nonetheless, both essences and qualities are properties of some sort. So Aristotle's constructing here a substance property ontology. Okay, then you have relations. This is the fourth category of the 10, secondary substance, quantity, quality, and relation. So relation could be that, say, Morris is fatter than Morris is fatter than Felix. So that's the relation, right, of being plumper than, right? Weighing more than. So that too can't exist for Aristotle unless there are objects which stand in the relation. Okay, then you have the categories of place and time. So like, where is the substance? How long is the substance around? And then you've got two sort of odd categories, being in a position and having. You would think being in a position could be maybe reduced to place or something like that. But anyway, he distinguishes them. He says the book can be in a certain place, like on the desk. It's in that place. But it could be in different positions in that place. Like it could be lying down, or it could be like standing up, or like that. Do the house of cards thing. An angle. So he distinguishes being in a place from being in a position. I suppose you could say, well, it's really in a different place when it's in a different position, and get rid of that category. But he's got it for some reason. The reasons are obscure for why he feels we need to have this as a special category. I'm sure there was a reason, but it may be lost to us. But it seems wrong. I mean, it doesn't seem like you need it. Seemed like it'd be better just to go with places and simplify, but then you wouldn't have 10. And so he wants to have 10 categories. That may be the reason, right? By the way, this kind of situation where you have two things leaning against each other, just to go back to causation here, because it's an interesting example. This book being in that position is the cause of that book being in that position that it's in. But that book being in that position is the cause of that book's being in that position. Ceteris paribus, in the circumstances, this book's being in this position is necessary and sufficient for that book's being in that position, and vice versa. So it seems like you can have a circular system of causes, of partial causes from that, right? Because that causes that, which causes that. Which is interesting. What seems much more difficult and is probably impossible is a total cause which produces another total cause, which in turn produced the first total cause. That doesn't seem possible. I think if you have anything approaching that, actually, I think turns out to be a case of correlation and not causation, like night and day. But with partial causes, seems like you do have A causing B and B causing A. Seems okay. In virtue of all these background conditions that don't have to be brought into it. All right, so being in a position was the seventh category. The eighth is called having. It's kind of odd also. All this is in Aristotle's categories, by the way, if you want to read up on it, which is quite short. But it was one of the few works that medieval philosophers had throughout the early Middle Ages, was just the categories and part of the posterior analytics, which basically deals with different kinds of arguments, but doesn't contain Aristotle's system of formal logic, which is in the prior analytics. It had to wait till like the 12th century. All the rest of Aristotle's works, which are like that thick, and they just have like that much. So once they got all the missing stuff, and to do that they had to learn how to read Greek. So there are only two works that had been translated by Roman philosophers into Latin, which were those two, the categories and posterior analytics. All the rest was just left in Greek because they could read Greek. So it was no problem. But in the Middle Ages, early part of the Middle Ages, no one knew Greek, so that's why they said this stuff is all Greek to me, like unintelligible gibberish. So they had to go with the Latin works, which were very few for Aristotle. Nor did they have access to Plato much, except through what other commentators had said about them much later in Latin. So it was an odd situation. But at any rate, but they did have this stuff. So they had the theory of they had the categories. All right. So having was the seventh. The seventh. Having's also a weird one. His example is wearing armor, like having armor on. So like it's the relation between a man or a woman and their attire, like armor or a hat. So it's a kind of possession, but it's not quality possession. It's possession of a substance like armor or clothing or something like that. What category could we get that under if we didn't want to recognize that? I guess either relation or quality. It seemed like we need that one. Then he had two other ones, which are also relations, but these are very important nonetheless. Doing and being affected. So this is basically analogous. Well, basically, I mean, we could treat it as basically causing and being affected by. So they're opposites. So sometimes they're described as action and passion. So if a match is ignited and then the flame burns you, then the flame is doing something, it's burning you. So that would be an instance of that. On the other hand, you are burnt by the flame. So the flame actively burns you, and then as effect of that, you are burned by the flame. So what the flame does to you is an instance of the category of doing, and what's done to you as a result of the flame is under the category of effects. So you are affected by. That's the passion by it, by being burnt. Okay, so your being burnt falls under the category of being affected, and the match's burning you falls under the category of activity or doing. It does something to you. So they're flip sides of the same phenomena of cause and effect. So that rounds out Aristotle's 10 categories. So this whole account of substances as primary substances as things which are neither set of a subject nor in a subject falls within the context of this theory of the 10 categories. Okay, so the primary substance, as I've noted, is kind of the fulcrum or presupposition of all of this. Right. All of these categories, the 10 categories, are all properties or relations that are exemplified by primary substances. Right. Either properties like essences or qualities or quantities, or places or times or being in a position, or their relations like having and doing and being affected by, or other relations that fall under the category of relation. So you have our primary substances and then 10 different categories of properties or relations, different kinds of properties or relations. Some of them are time, some are places. Right? Some are events, which are causes, others events, which are effects. Others are other relations, like being fatter than or heavier than. Some are places or times. So clearly Aristotle holds some kind of relational theory of space here, involving ultimately the relations of substances and qualities. Events are recognized within doing and being affected, right, as activities engaged in by substances in virtue of their qualities or relations and so on, or changes and such. All right, so what's meant then by being said of a substance? What's meant by being said of? So we have these two relations used in the definition of a substance. Substance is that which is neither said of nor in a subject. So let me put that up here. So according to the second definition of Aristotle, the one that's not based on intrinsic change, right, a substance is that which is neither said of a subject nor in a subject. Nor in a subject. So it's not either of these. It's not said of any subject, and it's not in a subject. All right, so the first notion to talk about is said of. We can say that A is said of B means that A is a species or a genus of B. Okay, so suppose A is animal, and B is a living thing. So in that case, A is a species of B. Animal is a species of living thing. You can think of a species as sort of a subcategory or subclass of a more general class. So what would be another example of A being a species of B? Let's see, anyone come up with one? Where one predicate picks out a class that's a subclass of a more general predicate, or a subcategory or subkind of a more general or broader kind. Say collie is a species of dog. Yeah, okay. So then we could say that A is a set of B. A collie is a collies are a subclass or subgroup, because we don't consider them a species in the biological sense, so you shouldn't confuse the biological sense of species with the logical sense. In logic, a species is just any subclass of a broader class. It doesn't have to count as a biological species. So collies wouldn't be a species because they can reproduce with other subclasses of dogs, whatever. But dogs can't reproduce with cats, so they each count as separate species. So there's a special meaning in biology for species. But here we're just talking about more general and more specific groups. So red is a species of color. Good. Yeah. So correspondingly, then, we can say that color is a genus of red. So a genus is the more general class that subsumes some narrower class, or a broader category or kind that wholly includes or subsumes some narrower or more specific category or kind. All right. So if we say red is a color, then we're saying then color is being said of red, because color is a genus of red. But if, on the other hand, if we say that some colored things are red, then we're saying what? Red of colored things. So that's okay, though, by the definition, because definition says that A is said of B if and only if A is either a species or a genus of B. So there are two ways you can go with this. You can say all red things are colored, in which case you're attributing the genus to the species. You're saying the genus of the more specific class, which is red. So all red things are colored things. So we're saying colored of red things. We're applying the genus to the narrower species that falls within it. Or we could say some colored things are red, flip it around. Some colored things are red, then we're attributing the species red to some colored things. So we're saying the species of the genus. Yeah. So you can go either way. So set of A is set of B if and only if A is either a species or a genus of B. Any question about how that makes sense? All right. Now what about the in relation? What does it mean to say that something is in a subject? All right, well, there are three things involved there. First is Aristotle's idea that there's an intuitive, ordinary language sense or usage of the word in, such that we can say in ordinary language that X is in Y, or that X is of Y, or that X belongs to Y, or that Y has X, and so on. There's an ordinary sense that he wants to zero in on, in which we can say all of these things, and they mean roughly, or they mean the same thing. They're just different ways of picking out the same relation of one thing being in another. An example might be when you have a pain. The pain can be said to be in a particular part of your body. Like I have a pain in my big toe, right? You've stubbed your toe on the staircase, right? Running up the steps, not wearing your slippers, right? And your toe is in agony for the moment, right? And so that pain is in your toe, right? So that's a kind of example of what Aristotle had in mind. I don't think we can spell out exactly what it is any further, except by appealing to examples. But they seem sort of intuitive. So that's the first condition that's involved in A being in B, that we can correctly say in this ordinary sense that A is in B, like the pain is in your toe. Okay. The second part of it is that A, the thing that's in the other thing, is not a part of that thing. So think about the pain. Is the pain a part of your big toe? What are the parts of your big toe? The nail, right? The nail bed, your big toe bone, various blood cells and flesh and so on, and muscles, whatever, right? And so on, right? So those are all parts of your big toe. But is the pain a part of your big toe? Does your big toe lose a part when it stops hurting? No, right? It doesn't lose any parts, right? Hopefully. You haven't lost any parts when you stubbed your toe. But even if you did, they'd be like part of your nail got dented or whatever, right? Fell off, something, right? Or some cells died if it got black and blue or whatever. Right? So the pain meets that criterion too. We can say it's in your toe, and we can say, and we can't say that it's part of your toe. And the third condition is that A cannot exist apart from B. So although it's not a part of B, it can't exist apart from B. So can the pain that you feel in your big toe when you stub your toe on the staircase because you didn't wear your slippers, can it exist apart from your big toe? Could that very pain exist if you didn't have a big toe? Doesn't seem possible, right? If you have a pain in your big toe, it depends on that big toe for that pain to exist, whatever kind of existence pains have, if any. It seems that they can't exist without the bodily part that they're in. So then we can say that in Aristotle's sense, the pain is in your toe. We're inclined to say that it's in there somehow, right? That's the first criterion. It's not a part of the toe, though, right? Like the nail. But it can't exist without, and furthermore, it can't exist without the toe. So if it meets all three of those conditions, then we can say the pain is in your big toe, in Aristotle's second sense. It's in a subject. The subject is the big toe, and the pain is in that subject. Okay, so a substance is something which is not said of a subject and not in a subject. See? Now, what could we say from this about pains? That pains are dependent entities. The pain in your big toe, because it meets these criteria, because it's in there, and it's not a part, but it can't exist without the big toe, is a kind of dependent entity. So in saying that substances are not in a subject, Aristotle's committing himself to a metaphysical thesis that substances, primary substances, right, do not depend on any subject. That they can't be in a subject, and in that sense are independent of subjects. Because as we've seen, this in relation is a relation of dependence. Seems to be a metaphysical dependence relation. So he's saying, Aristotle's saying here, substances don't stand in that relation, so they're metaphysically independent in some sense of these subjects. It seems the only sense in which we can say that a substance is in another substance, Aristotle, I think, would say, is that it's a part of that other substance, but then it won't be in it in this sense. It'll just be in it by virtue of being part of it, but that's not a kind of dependence because the substance is made up of all kinds of parts, and clearly we could say that the substance depends upon its parts rather than the parts depending upon the substance, it seems. There are many tricky questions, I should say, about exactly the metaphysical status of parts. So, I don't want to prejudge here, really. We'll get into a discussion of those questions. At this point, we'll get into that later in another unit, perhaps, on parts. Or perhaps later in the unit on substances, some of these questions may come up. When we need a criterion of exactly which parts can qualify as substances and perhaps which cannot, and so forth. All right, so so based on these criteria, Aristotle comes up with four classes. Okay, because you've got set of a subject and in a subject, right? And then together with the negations of those, you're going to come up with a total of four categories or groups based on combining these. So what you're going to have, first of all, is things that are said of a subject, but not in a subject. So that's group one. So in this category, we can come up, we can put the secondary substances here, or the essences. These are set of a subject, like cat. Cat is set of Morris. When we say that Morris is a cat or has catness, we're implying that catness is set of the subject Morris. But catness isn't in Morris. Why? Well, it doesn't meet those three criteria. Catness can exist without Morris. Remember, the third criterion is of the in relation is that the thing that's in something else can't exist without that something else. Like the pain can't exist. That pain can't exist without that toe. The pain in the toe. This wouldn't be the case, though, with catness vis-a-vis Morris, because even if Morris had never existed, catness would exist in virtue of Felix and Garfield being cats. Right? So catness in general, the general essence of all cats, doesn't depend on any particular cat that you might pick. It does require that there be some cat, but that's all you can say. It's not any particular one of the possible cats. All right, so Essences, full here like Cadmus. Set of a subject, but not in a subject. Set of Morris, but not in Morris. Set of a cat, but not in a cat. Okay, in a subject, but not set of it. Here Aristotle gives the example of the particular wisdom of Socrates. Accidental particular qualities. The particular wisdom of Socrates was my example. Many interpret Aristotle as having advocated the existence of what contemporary metaphysicians call tropes, particular qualities that exist as concrete individuals. Another example would be, in addition to the particular wisdom of Socrates, say the particular redness of this book, or the particular rectangularity of the book, where these are concrete particulars that can never be repeated in anything else, and so on. So clearly these are, they seem to be in a subject. So the particular wisdom of Socrates appears to be in Socrates. Intuitively, it's in him, right? His particular wisdom. It's not a part of Socrates, though, right? Like his right arm or left foot or something like that, right? And it's also incapable of existing apart from Socrates. That particular wisdom can't exist in anyone else. Plato can't have it because it's Socrates' particular wisdom, which is incapable of existing apart from Socrates by definition. Okay. So they're in a subject, but they're not set of any subject, according to Aristotle. You can't say or predicate that particular wisdom of anything else. It's so unique and particular that it can't be a genus of anything else. Nor is it a species of anything either. Right? So the species, of course, is the general class of red things. So this is just a particular redness. So it's neither set of, it's in a subject but not set of any subject. Only general concepts or terms can be a genus or species. Okay, the third group is set of a subject and in a subject. Okay, these are also accidents, but they're not particular qualities. These are accidental general characteristics. Like the tropes, they're accidental, but they're not as particular. They're more general. They're not tropes. They're general properties. Accidental general characteristics. An example would be knowledge. All right, so how can knowledge be set of a subject and in a subject? Okay, first of all, set of a subject. We can say that knowledge of grammar is knowledge. Right? So knowledge of grammar would be a species of the more general category of knowledge, right? So knowledge of grammar, knowledge of cooking, whatever, right? We have all of these different species of knowledge, grammatical knowledge, culinary knowledge, and so on, right? So we can, knowledge can be said of knowledge of grammar when we say that knowledge of grammar is knowledge. So knowledge can be said of a subject. The subject is knowledge of grammar, the subject that it's said of. So knowledge of grammar is knowledge. Aristotle also claims that knowledge can be in a subject when we say, for example, that knowledge is in the soul. So it's both set of a subject and in a subject. Knowledge is in the soul, he says. Or in the mind. So knowledge is in the mind or the soul, right? In the intuitive sense. Is it a part of the soul? No. Soul's not made out of qualities. It's made out of some kind of stuff, like brain cells or something, whatever. Right? Or maybe souls don't have parts, right? Maybe they're just sort of centers of consciousness or something, in which case knowledge still won't be part of them. So, and it's clear that you can't have knowledge unless you have a mind or soul. So the third condition, that it's incapable of existing without the thing it's in, is met. You can't have knowledge without minds or souls. So Aristotle thinks that all three conditions of being in a subject are met, and that knowledge is therefore in a subject, and we've already seen that it can be said of knowledge of grammar, so it's said of a subject as well. So general characteristics like knowledge turn out to be in the third category. And the fourth category is individual substance, neither said of a subject nor in a subject. So here, for example, an individual man, Socrates, would be an example. Socrates can't be said of any subject. Socrates isn't a species or genus. Nor is Socrates in any subject. Right? What subject would he be in? It's not like a pain in your foot. Pains can be in Socrates and depend on him, but Socrates isn't in anything else. It doesn't depend on it. Right? So, yeah. Right, so those are the four groupings. So here you have primary substances here in this fourth category. Third category, general characteristics. Second category, tropes or particular qualities. And first category, essences of primary substances. So you've got essences, particular qualities, general characteristics, and primary substances. So this is the four-category ontology. Earlier, Aristotle presented the 10-category ontology, but he sees the two as compatible with each other. All of those 10 categories fall within either 1, 2, or 3. And primary substance, which is the bedrock of it all, is in the fourth. It's kind of the 11th category, right? Because the 10 that he's got in the table of the 10 categories are either going to be essences or particular qualities or general characteristics of some sort, which may be relational as well. Relations, like properties, are attributable or predicable of individual things. All right, so what are we to make of this account? It seems pretty ingenious. It's certainly complex. There are some problems that have been posed. If you consider a property which is unexemplified, like being a unicorn or unicornicity, it appears to meet the fall into that fourth category. It's not said of any subject, right? Because there are no unicorns. So it's neither said of a subject, and can it be in a subject? No, because again, there are no unicorns, so it's neither said of a subject nor in a subject, so it would be an individual substance, but that's absurd. Unicornicity isn't any kind of individual substance. It's a Platonic object of some sort, right? So what would Aristotle say about that? What would he say about the property of being a unicorn? This example would challenge the sufficiency of Aristotle's definition. You say there are some things, being a unicorn, which are neither a set of a subject nor in a subject. So how would Aristotle deal with that? Any thoughts? Think back to our unit on the problem of universals, right? So what did Aristotle say about universals in contrast to Plato? Right, all universals or all properties are exemplified for Aristotle, so he would reject the existence of being a unicorn. So that would be his response. But if you want your definition of substance to be neutral on the debate about the status of universals, as to whether they depend on individual substances or exist apart from individual substances, as Plato thought, then you'll have to seek elsewhere for a definition of substance if you want to be neutral. So again, it comes down to a question of ontological neutrality as far as this example goes. So Aristotle's definition works so far, at least, if you assume his ontology, but his ontology of universals, which is fine, but it won't work otherwise. So one might reasonably want to have a broader definition that's neutral on that question. Okay. There's another objection, though, which is that Aristotle's definition doesn't provide a necessary condition for substantiality or individual substancehood. Consider something which is definitely a substance, say like a dog, right, Rover. So you have this dog, Rover here. Now clearly, Rover can't be said of anything, but can Rover be in something? Well, one of the things in Aristotle's ontology, it seems, is space or place. That's one of its categories, right? Right, so can a dog exist apart from space? No, right? Can't have a dog without a place that the dog is in. Okay, so the dog is incapable of existing apart from space. That's one of the criteria for being in a subject. The subject is space, and Rover is going to be in a subject, I'm going to argue. All right, because he says a substance is neither set of a subject nor in a subject. Okay. Okay, so the dog is in space. The dog cannot exist apart from space. He's also in space, because we'd all say in ordinary language that dogs and physical objects generally are all in space and time. So, right? That would be a normal thing to say, at least in a metaphysics class. that Rover is in space. So Rover's in a subject, space, cannot exist apart from that subject. Right? Is Rover part of space? That's the third condition, right? That it's not a part. No, Rover's not part of space, right? Any more than pain is a part of your toe, right? Space seems to be totally unfazed by taking Rover. It's not like you've grabbed a chunk of space and pulled it out. Okay, so it looks like Rover's in space, but that contradicts the definition. Turns out that Rover's not a substance. So, yeah. So it seems like this definition is too demanding and requiring that the substances not be in a subject, given the definition of being in that Aristotle provides. I don't really see any effective response to that one. That's not ad hoc, saying, well, we say substances are in space, but that's not the sense of in. But it wasn't clear what the sense of in was, except that we ordinarily would say that it's in something, and we do ordinarily say that physical objects are in space. So yeah. All right, so not only is this definition not as ontologically neutral as we might ideally desire, but it also seems to be subject to counterexamples in terms of space, even given Aristotle's ontology, because he affirms place and time as categories within his system of 10 categories. Okay. Let's turn to some other theories of substance that were historically prominent. One of these is known as the substratum theory. So it says that a substance is something which undergirds all of the qualities that we perceive. So if we look at a substantial object, say the table or desk or whatever this is, I guess it's a portable desk. You perceive a bunch of qualities, right? Like the shape and the color and the texture and solidity and all these different, the weight and all these different qualities are perceptible. But there's something there that goes beyond those qualities, because we say there's a substantial object there, not just a bunch of qualities. So if we do say that, according to the substratum theorist, we're presupposing the existence of something that's beneath the qualities and which supports all of them, which we call the substance of the thing. That's what they say. And they call this the substratum, the undergirding thing that supports the qualities we perceive. This is known as the substratum theory. So according to the substratum theory, at least one form of it, the substratum itself doesn't have any qualities because it's the thing that supports the qualities that are there. So according to this version, a substratum is a quote-unquote bare particular. It's a particular which is itself bare or unclothed by any properties. So you have this bare particular which supports the qualities of the thing. So in one version of this view, the substratum is the substance. One version identifies the substance with this bare particular, with this propertyless particular. So this view says that the substance, substance equals the substratum, which equals a bare particular. Another version of this says that the substratum is the bare particular plus the properties which it supports. So it's a complex. The substance is the complex of the bare particular and the supported properties. So they would say the substance equals the substratum plus So the substance equals the bare particular plus the properties supported by that bare particular. This means that we have to, on the second version, come up with a relation other than that of exemplification, which the bare particular stands to the supported properties in. Because if we say that the bare particular exemplifies the properties, then we're back to saying it's not then we'd be saying it's not a bare particular. It would become basically a substance then, right? In the ordinary sense, that is, a propertied, would then be a propertied individual, apparently indistinguishable from what we call an individual substance, and we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. So it's got to be a different relation, the relation of between a bare particular and the properties it supports. The supporting relation can't be that of having those properties, or can't involve having those properties at all, on pain of contradiction. So it's some other relation. Maybe the substance is somehow a cluster of collection, of a substratum and properties. Or maybe the properties can't exist without the substratum, but they're not had by the substratum or something, right? Or whatever, some kind of relation other than the substratum actually having those properties itself, because the theory says it's bare. So. All right, so will this theory stand up to scrutiny? Well, not really, not very much scrutiny. One problem affects the whole idea of a bare particular. Can there be any entity that is bereft of properties? Doesn't seem like a viable position. One problem would be that if you had a thing that had no properties, it would imply that it had the property of lacking all properties. Seems to be self-contradictory to say that a thing lacks all properties. Plus, it's got a property, being a particular, also. Right? We might say being bare is not a property, right? You might say lacking all properties, which is what bareness is not a property because it's negative or something like that. Okay, fine, right? You might say only positive things are really properties. Okay, well, being a particular is positive, and bare particulars have that property at least. So, and it seems like they would have to have other properties as well, right? Because particulars have certain characteristics in virtue of which they're particulars, right? Like perhaps being in space or being in time or something like that, right? So then it would have properties like that, like enduring or existing or persisting over some period of time or being located here or there or having size or shape or some kinds of properties. This doesn't seem to make sense to say it's totally bare. So if that's the case, we can reject this theory, reject this whole family of theories that involve the idea of an entity which either lacks properties or which possibly lacks all properties, at least, as fundamentally flawed due to its ultimate incoherence. All right, so much for the substratum theory. Then there's the inherence theory, which is sometimes conflated or confused with the substratum theory, but they're two very distinct lines of thought. The inherence theory says that a substance, X is a substance if and only if properties in here in X. So this basically says that substances are property bearers. That's a necessary condition, right? Every substance is, by its nature, a bearer of properties. This seems to be sort of the opposite of the substratum theory, actually, right? Is it saying that everything that's truly a substance must have properties? The trouble is that being a bearer of properties is not a logically sufficient condition for a substance, because every entity, whether it's a substance or not, has properties. And so take something that's totally insubstantial, like the number 7. The number 7, of course, has properties inhering in it. Like what? The property of being odd, the property of being the successor of 6 and the predecessor of 8, and so on. Right? The property of being the sum of 1 and a perfect number, 6, which is a perfect number. It's got all these properties. So properties inhere in the number 7, so then the number 7 would be a substance, but no, the number 7 is not a primary substance. Some kind of abstract entity, totally insubstantial. And we could find many other examples. The surface of the table has properties. One of its properties is being flat. That doesn't make the table surface an individual substance. So the inherence theory won't either. That takes us to the independence theory. Now, the independence theory has something in common with Aristotle's neither said of nor in, because remember, not being in a subject was a kind of independence relation. Right? Being in was a dependence relation, so not being in made substances independent, as we noted. But the independence theory tries to analyze substance just in terms of ontological dependence without using any other notions. Aristotle's was a hybrid. It had also not being said of a subject, which is not an independence relation. So seems to be a kind of semantical relationship. All right, so the independence theories. There are different forms of independence theory, depending on exactly the relation of independence that is utilized. So next time we'll start with those. We'll look at Descartes and Spinoza's definitions of substance in terms of their ontological independence, and examine the difficulties that confront their versions of the independence criterion of substance.